It's about 5 minutes after 3. I want to welcome everybody to the City Temple. Hit the button. Just hit the button. Okay, now we can stop. Thanks everybody for attending today's workshop. First item, as usual, is any public comments for the workshop agenda items. Is it blank? It is blank. Very good. We will move on to item 2, which is the work session. We're going to go a little bit out of order. We're going to move item number 5 up to the first presentation. We have Sid Balk with us today to review the city council redistricting process. And since everything else is by staff, we're going to receive his presentation so he can go about his day. Mr. Balk?
Good afternoon. Where would you like to be?
Usually right up there. Yeah, if that works, so everybody can see.
Let's see, have a presentation?
Yeah, he's just.
Totally ad lib today. My name is Sid Falk. I'm a partner with Bickerstaff, Costa and Austin, we're redistricting lawyers. And I want to talk today, give you an overview of what the process looks like and why you're doing it.
It's the camera.
All right. So redistricting is driven by a federal law requirement that single member districts have approximately equal population. You presumably redistricted in 2011. And at that point, based on the census then, you had that population balance. You have grown probably in uneven ways across your city, and that's going to throw things off. We will know for sure when we get the data. The first thing we will do, we call the initial assessment, which is just what it sounds like. We take your current boundaries and put the new census data, population data in to see whether or not you are in sufficient population equality balance that you don't have to redistrict, but you're probably going to have to. The rule of thumb that courts have recognized in the past, not an absolute rule, but 99.95%, is you look at the most populous district and the least populous district and compare them to the average, the ideal district. If top and bottom is less than 10% of that ideal district, you're safe. If it's bigger than that, you have to redistrict. And the process is to redraw all of your district lines in a way to put them back in population balance. There are some other legal requirements that you have to pay attention to. In particular, the Voting Rights Act proscribes certain kinds of discriminatory effects with respect to protected minority groups. That's why you have lawyers looking over your shoulder to do this. We will pay attention to that and the line of Supreme Court cases that has put a limit on how much race can be a part of your redistricting considerations. So if you have to redistrict, we will give you an initial assessment report at a meeting and tell you yay or nay. And assuming that it's yes, we will point out which of the districts are overpopulated and how much. We'll give you the statistics and ask you to adopt a couple of resolutions. One of them is what we call redistricting criteria. And those are the factors that you will follow when you draw a new plan. They are things like put yourself in population balance, sort of duh. Follow the law, don't violate the Voting Rights Act. And then practical things like where feasible, keep neighborhoods and communities of interest together. Try not to split them. Use obvious boundaries, main streets if possible, rivers, streams, railroad tracks, whatever is fairly clear. Don't draw your lines down an alley or split a city block. Common sense kind of guidelines, but you'd be surprised in the past how many people have tried to enable those kinds of things. If it's feasible, try to use county election precincts as your building blocks. That helps the county with elections and you with elections. and ballots and ballot styles and all the rest of that. It may not be feasible. In big urban communities, that's a tolerable way to go. Avoid splitting census blocks. The census reports data on what's called census geography. They define the census geography for the whole country. There are census blocks, which is the smallest unit. In a city, it looks like a city block. In suburban or rural areas, they can be big and irregular. But avoid splitting them if you can. Things, just common sense, things like that. The second resolution we would ask you to adopt is guidelines for public participation, especially if somebody is going to submit a plan for you to consider. You want them to use census data and not just make stuff up. You want them to report the population and demographics of the districts that they draw so that you can compare them. You want to require them to draw the whole city and not just a pet district, because it's an exercise of drawing the whole city. There are ripple effects if you change a boundary on one of the districts that can propagate not only into the adjacent district, but all the way around. So it's the whole of the city that's being redrawn. So we would ask you to, and we have these drawn up for you to review and look at. We would ask you to adopt those as starting points for the next step, which is to have a workshop or two where we actually draw with you. We will provide what we call an illustrative plan at the outset for the workshop to show you what it would look like to minimally change your existing boundaries as necessary to achieve that population balance. It's really hard to react if you're told your district has got 5,000 too many people and you're going to have to give them up. It's a whole lot easier if we draw and show you what that looks like. You can react to it as singularly and as a group. And we can arrange to display with our drawer back in Austin the plan that we're looking at on your screen, and with a audio connection, ask the drawer to move the boundary 3 streets over. Our software will take care of all the population accounting and show a table at the bottom that shows you what the new population distribution is with that change, including all the demography. So we have a live drawing session or two as necessary to get you to a point where you're comfortable with the plan. You ask for public comment typically, and you get good comments and bad comments, and you react to them or not, and do some fine tuning. And then you are at a place where you in principle can adopt. So that's the sort of steps that we will go through. And now the constraints. You have probably not been able to avoid some of the news stories about the census data release. It is horrendously late this cycle. They're supposed by law to have given everybody redistricting data by April 1. Obviously did not happen. The Census Bureau is saying that their data in the new format that they want to use will come out at the end of September. Now, you've probably read about an earlier release that happened last week, about a week ago. That was a release of the same data, but in the old style format, which sounds wonderful until you think that the software programmers all wrote their programs for the new format. And so you can't just take the stuff that Census released and stick it into your program and have it work. Our vendor is going to take 2 to 3 weeks to convert the data for the various states that he's got clients in. It's a statewide data set that has to be then downloaded and massaged down to the county level. And then we will stick that in with your current city limit lines and so on. So it won't happen that quickly. The other catch-22 that's going to drive at least our service to our clients is that the counties have to have a plan in place in time for the primary candidate sign-up date. They can't have, they've got a general election next November, but to use that plan, state law says whatever redistricting is in place during the primaries can't be changed. So if they want a new plan, and they do, they have to have it ready for the primaries, which are in March, unless the legislature moves them. And no indication they're going to. And candidate sign up for those primaries begins on November 13th of this year. The counties, if we have data in hand in the first week or two of September, the counties have until the end of the middle of the second week of November. They have 8 weeks to do their entire redistricting. It's going to be messy and very cumbersome for them. So Bell County is who we are also helping, as you probably know, is going to be hard pressed to get their process done. Your deadline is also a candidate filing beginning, which is in January of next year. I think January 19th is the first day, which means you have to adopt by the 18th. You have a little bit more time, but we will start the counties and then begin the initial assessments for our city and school clients with May elections. And you will probably see an initial assessment probably early to mid-October, something like that. And we will get with you. I think actually our folks have already gotten with somebody, or likely to have, and set up tentative dates and times for those other steps. The initial assessment report meeting, for the workshop number 1, for the workshop number 2, for the public hearing, and for the adoption meeting. And we will get all of that stuff done somehow. But the message is it's going to be short. There's not going to be as much time as everybody would like to have for internal process, much less public process. You may find, for instance, that at the beginning of the second workshop on drawing, you want your public meeting then to get comments that you can react to in that other drawing session. There may not be a whole lot of time for more than that. So that's what we're looking at. It's doable. It's not going to be the purposeful, more leisurely product that we have had in the past, where we would have had months and months to be doing all this, but we will get you through it. Any questions? No gnashing of teeth, pulling of hair?
Are the drawing sessions that you alluded to public?
Yes.
Public will be involved with that?
Yeah, we in the past talked to individual governing body members privately, but in the last decade, the Open Meetings Act law has changed a little bit, gotten a little tighter, and we're not going to do anything that smacks of individual meetings this time.
Certainly not.
So these will all be public meetings. They can be regular council meetings or workshops like this. Probably better to have them be workshops. But we can work with you to get those scheduled and work out the way you like.
But Susan, unless you invited the active participation of someone, it would be, they could observe the work that
Sure.
you're doing, but wouldn't necessarily, speak up during the work session and say, move that line over there or something like that, unless that's how you.
Well, I guess
You
that's
wanted
what
to
I
set it
really
up.
meant was, will we set up community groups to be part of the drawing process? That's what I was
Yes,
sort of
ma'am.
alluding
Yeah,
to.
one of the part of the answer to that question is how much time you have to
Right.
do all of those things. We think it will be pushing the envelope to really have a lot of that kind of formalized avenues for participation.
Sounds like.
And as I say, there are a couple of ways to do the public hearing. You could do them after a couple of workshops and have a public hearing, say, if you really want to be economical, before an adoption meeting. And if you were unable to adopt because you wanted to react to the comments, then you'd have to put the adoption off. The other way to handle that might be more efficient is if the first drawing session produces a plan that more or less reaches consensual approval as something you propose to the public, you would have a public hearing, formal public hearing, before your next drawing session. And that way you would have time with the drawing session already set to take into account any of the comments that you thought you needed to react to.
Out of curiosity, are cities typically single member districts or at large?
Mostly single member. Interestingly, the largest holdout for years was Austin, which was, I don't know, 13th largest city in the country and the largest city with a at-large election system. But as you probably know, they had a charter amendment last time and took it out of the hands of the council entirely. So an interesting process.
Remind me, when did you say we would probably receive the data?
Well, we will have the data sometime in early September to load in. You will get our initial assessment report sometime in probably early to mid first week or two of October.
So that's the first thing we'll get.
Yes, ma'am.
Kind of balanced by both population and race?
The federal requirement is to balance the population. There is a subset of other stuff based on the Voting Rights Act that we have to also pay attention to. And that's going to depend a lot on the number and concentration and distribution across the city of minority groups. And we won't really know what that looks like until we see the data at the initial assessment.
So redistricting is done actually just straight population versus registered voters?
Yes.
Correct.
And if you violate the other stuff, you can get sued under the Voting Rights Act. So there's a good incentive not to do that. And we'll help you with that. We have done this. This is my fourth time. Gunner's done a number of redistrictings in the mid-decade. People that found a reason or were told they had to redistrict anyway. Bob Heath has done, this will be his fifth. David Mendez, his fourth as well. Our GIS person's been through 3. Bob and I have defended a number of Voting Rights Act lawsuits successfully. We have never done a plan that we recommended that lost a lawsuit. So we think we can say you're in good hands.
Council, anything else from Mr. Falk? It'll be an interesting process.
It'll be fun. You just have to remember that it is. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Districting, interesting process in that it's one of the few things you can say you've done 4 times and you claim that you're an expert at it. But since you only do it once every 10 years, that's a career.
That's true.
It is, and we have typically done about 100 to 120 clients each time.
Ooh,
Some of them after the main purge of redistricting. We have 40 county clients, about 24 cities and schools with May 2022 elections, and a bunch like San Antonio that don't have elections until the next year. So we will be busy.
so a city like San Antonio, you can delay because of the timing.
Yes.
Their timing.
Yes,
That helps for
very
you.
much. It helps, and yeah, there's no 2 ways about it. Thank you again for your time and attention.
Thank you, sir.
And
All right.
council, just as a reminder, we did enter into an interlocal agreement between Bell County, the cities of Colleen and Temple and TISD. So we're all using the same consultant as we did. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Thank y'all. All right, and let's just go back to item number 1, which is to discuss as maybe needed any regular meeting agenda items posted for tonight's meeting. Any comments, discussion? Item number 2 is to receive a presentation regarding the third quarter financials from Ms. Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to present the third quarter financial statements for the 9 months ended June 30th, 2021. Looking at revenues for 4 of our major funds, comparing actual to budget, and we're 75% of the year complete. General fund is at 84.43% of budget. Water sewer fund is at 64.79%. Hotel motel at 66%, and drainage fund is at 76.43%. I wanted, on the water sewer fund, I'll go over some of the data on, we have had more rain this year. It's been a milder summer. Residential consumption is down. But on the hotel motel fund, we were continuing to struggle, or our hotels through the fall and early spring didn't have the occupancy that they had prior to the pandemic. But in the recent months, they have exceeded pre-pandemic occupancy. So that's helped a lot in the hotel motel fund. The highlight revenue, sales tax, major revenue source of the general fund. And this is actually looking at 10 months through July 31. Where City of Temple is over 14% increase compared to the same period last year. And statewide cities are right above, all cities in Texas are about 10% ahead of where they were a year or over the same period. But, Temple's over to the next to the far right, but as a percent of budget, we're at 118% of budget. When last year, when we presented the budget for adoption for FY 2021, we were just started the pandemic, uncertainty of what the year would bring, and the local economy, statewide economy, especially our local economy, has really been strong. And it appears we may end the year a little over $4 million ahead of budget on sales tax. So property taxes for the year, this is current property tax collections. We're at 98.61% compared to the previous 4 years. We've exceeded the collection rate. And this is just, I wanted to show you a chart on consumption and water revenue as it relates to water revenues. For 2021, the red line is rainfall. And again, rainfall, we have had more rainfall, but when rainfall occurs can also impact your consumption. Is it in the early spring? Is it late fall, or is it summertime? All of that can impact your consumption data, but residential is down about 5% and commercial is pretty steady compared to the previous year. Expenditures, the general fund, we are at 69.41%. Water and sewer fund, we're at 72.31%. Hotel motel at 55.6%. And the drainage fund, a little less than 40%.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
On the general fund, 75% through the year, you're 69% on expenses, which is good. Is there any seasonality to expenses that you think might change that trend line over the last 3 months?
And let me go to this next slide here. When we look at these categories of expenses for the general fund, personnel services, we do have some seasonal employees, but we try to, it is a full accrual basis when you compare it to budget. So you are going to see the way we budget, if everything was dollar for dollar actual to budget, you would be at 75%. We do have as of June 30th, I picked out the major funds or divisions. We had 42 vacancies on June 30th. So we have a lot of salary lag. I know the police department had 17. Operations, there are some seasonal, it's not going to be even over the 12 months compared to budget. And capital, we usually you'll see that the goal is to order that at the beginning of the year, fiscal year. So as far as the trends going out through September 30th, I think we'll continue to see personnel services below budget, which I'll show you. I think we're going to end the year there about 94.5%. We're 5% behind here, and we'll continue that trend at the end of the year. Operations will go up some at the end of the year over the next 3 months. And capital will be pretty close to 100%. So that answer your question?
So you're anticipating it's going to come in the range of 95%
Mhm.
of budget. Rough number.
Oops. And this shows when we forecast that out. Not in those categories, but I didn't show that, but revenues, we're looking, or forecasting will be very close to 104% of budget, a favorable variance of 3.2 million. And remember, sales tax makes up 4 million of that, so there's some other revenues that are not going to make budget, which I'll show in a few minutes. Expenditures, we're forecasting at 95%. Again, over 3 million of that 4.2 is related to salary or vacancy salary lag. And so add that together, a favorable variance of $7.4 million. This compares revenues to the budget. It's comparing where they over or under budget and then comparing it to the previous year. Again, showing the sales tax way up there. Solid waste revenues, that's in roll-off revenues, license and permits. And then on the far right, that's a bunch of miscellaneous revenues. And note in the previous year, or FY 2020, recreation, Kevin and them were totally shut down. Well, this year they've opened back up. They're still going to be under budget, but not as much. The golf course doing well above the line. Airport has to do with fuel cells and some hangar vacancies. So moving on into our investments, the yield curve, pretty flat, real low. Total investments, we have $307.8 million of investments. 72% of that's government pools, a little over 15% CDs, and 12.6% cash. And that is cash earning interest, most of it too. Very little, but is interest bearing. A year ago, our portfolio was earning about 0.85%. Today, it's 0.16. And our benchmark is the average rolling 90-day T-bill, and we're at 0.02%. It's our benchmark. We're ahead of it. Capital improvement program, again, $409.6 million. A lot of investments, underground, utilities, treatment plant, nearly a third of it, and then reinvestment zone, and you can see on down the list. We have a good many combination tax and revenue CO bonds, funding projects. This just looks at that same dollars by project. We have close to 41% either under construction or in progress, 34% in engineering based on number. Project complete, 14.69, and planning, 10.3. Our strategic investment zones, as of to June 30th, we had a balance of $345,487 available for CIS grants. And that concludes the third quarter financials. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm surprised we have so much left in our CIS grant fund.
I'd asked too, there's some smaller ones in the pipeline, but
They're not part of the encumbered number.
So I don't know if Brian has some other pending or.
We have one fairly significant project that we've had some preliminary conversations with the building owner. And I think part of the balance, if you'll recall, two things. One, the reinvestment zone made a commitment for some additional funding over and above what we had been doing. So we kind of had an influx of funding available. And then we also adjusted the criteria for the grant as we've seen kind of the incentives work and kind of tipping into a point where we've changed it to a match situation that essentially makes the money go farther for a project. So, the max grant is, I believe, 115. And, so one significant project could bring that number down pretty significantly.
In your quarterly report on page 94, we list the active grants or CIS grants and then just a history of the funding too.
We did pull back that Dyer's building.
The,
Correct.
is that the same as Secondhand Rose?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So is something gonna be happening to the Secondhand Rose building?
They had a grant that you all authorized a couple of years ago, and ultimately the project stalled and the grant expired, and we've let the owner know that they're eligible to be reconsidered, but they would need to reapply. And so with that, that's something that hopefully, we get to bring back to you. That would be a good thing.
That's the Dyer's building you were referring to.
Tracy, it's like I've asked this before, but I don't remember the answer if I did. As far as the payments, we're at like 98% of the tax appraisal district of the property tax, ad valorem tax payment. How does how are those ad valorem taxes payments made to the city? Are they quarterly? Because I saw where revenue was running at 84%, 75% of the way through the year. So
No, we collect a taxes are levied on October 1.
Right.
They become delinquent on February 1. So you collect, I think probably over 90% from October to January. So,
but when actual money is transferred to the city.
to the city, the appraisal district collects it.
Yeah.
And then they remit it to us, depending on, like in the fall, they can remit it.
Like after the October deadline? I mean, I guess the beginning of whenever you say the fall.
Beginning in
That's
October
first
when they
quarter.
start, they will start remitting it by wire daily. if
Okay.
There's big
So when they
collection.
collect it, they send it.
Mhm. And then we get reconciliation reports, detail reports. But it's not, you can't say it's every other day,
Mhm.
which just when they accumulate, they email, they wire it and send us notice.
Okay. So the first quarter, you're gonna be running way above budget, right? Because
Correct.
you've collected the bulk. First quarter lags into, so each quarter is less of a.
And a lot of the revenue sources, they're not equal. You don't take the annual amount and divide it by 12. It doesn't come in equally
Right,
through the months.
right.
So
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't think of any reason why they couldn't hold the money and pay, quarterly or whatever.
it's a lot of money.
I understand. Yeah. They want to hold it, but we want it back.
There is a reason, and she's the reason they sent it.
In fact, they have it where they put it directly into a, Texas Class has it set up where they invest it, put it in our name and that account.
Yeah.
And then we pull it out of
Draw
there.
it down. Okay, good.
So they're not just holding it, collecting interest.
No. And when interest rates were, 3, 4, 5, 6%, you earned a lot of,
Sure.
I always say a 100 basis point, 1% in interest rate was equivalent to a cent on our tax rate. So,
That's significant.
mhm.
Okay, good. Anything else?
I'm just looking at the sign and I noticed that Colleen's sign was hit 4 times this year already.
It's been hit.
You can see the
Fire
track.
truck.
Yes, so I'm grateful that no one has taken us out.
Yeah.
Go a long way up there.
You do, you do.
I think you'll roll over. All right. Very good.
No, no, no.
Thank you, Tracy.
But Tracy, they give you age and solidity.
Item 3 is to receive a presentation regarding the karst fauna region boundaries and habitat conservation plan development.
Subject we've all been waiting for.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so,
That's interspace.
exactly.
I know.
Stalactites and stuff.
So a little bit of background on the conversation and some definitions for, if I'm the only one who had never heard of karst before, this topic came up. I just wanted to get some baseline definitions out. So in April, Judge Blackburn received a call from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that advised him that Bell County had been designated as a county of interest for the karst fauna regions. So again, I not familiar with karst fauna region previously, just wanted to give some definitions. The karst is a natural landform, for example, a sinkhole or a cave that is produced by the dissolution of limestone bedrock. And karst can be home to one or more endangered karst invertebrate species. And in fact, in Travis, Williamson, and Bexar counties, there are 16 different karst invertebrates that are listed as endangered. All of the 16 species are what's known as a troglobite, which means they live the entirety of their life underground. And many of them have no eyesight or very poor eyesight because of the environment that they live in. The reason that we're talking about this today is that the extension of designated karst fauna regions or karst zones into Bell County could mean that we have some additional environmental assessment or potential mitigation required, and that could impact both public capital improvement projects as well as private development and construction projects within the county. So these are a few pictures of what we're talking about here. You can see the picture on the top right hand of the screen is one of those invertebrate species that's sitting on a penny. So you can see how small, relatively small they are. A little bit of history on this. The first study that resulted in the creation of karst fauna areas in Texas was conducted in 1994. You can see on the map there, the northern boundary is the political jurisdiction line between Williamson and Bell County. So a fairly arbitrary stopping point for that particular study. And that's what started the process of having the 16 species begin their process of being listed as endangered and protected under the Endangered Species Act. The map was updated again. An additional study was commissioned in 2007. You can see at that time that the map and the areas have crossed now into Bell County. And then in 2021, so this year, an additional study was commissioned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and those map areas have extended further into Bell County and become more defined. And this is what's leading the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I think, to contact Judge Blackburn and let him know that that there's a possibility that additional designated zones or areas will be established in Bell County and impact the work that we do. So,
Brent,
yes, sir.
is Bell County, I'm sorry, is Temple depicted on that map? Is that in the purple area? Kind of mid Bell County, it looks like.
Yes, sir.
And obviously that's why we're talking about it, but
There are the colors aren't representing geographic boundaries. They are representing karst
right.
zones,
Right.
potential karst zones, but some of them do bleed into Temple boundaries.
Into the city limits,
Yes.
ETJ-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
So potential impact for us is that, again, U.S. Fish is the federal agency that is charged with administration and enforcement of the Endangered Species Act. And as the agency that's responsible for that, they're tasked with developing a conservation strategy that is supposed to include states as well as other interested parties. The goal of that strategy is to conserve ecosystems upon which threatened or endangered species depend. There was an amendment to the Endangered Species Act in 1982 that created something called a habitat conservation plan. And this is important to our conversation today because this is a vehicle or an avenue that is intended to allow development to continue while also protecting rare species by ensuring mitigating conservation measures are conducted when there's going to be a construction activity or some activity that impacts a protected species, whether they be endangered or threatened. So if you have there's a section of the Endangered Species Act that deals with federal activities, and then there's a section that deals with non-federal activities. So in most cases, that's what we would fall under, as well as any private development. So when a non-federal activity may result in what they call a take of threatened or endangered wildlife, you are required to get an incidental take permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The purpose of the permit is not to authorize the activity that will result in the take, but it's specifically to authorize the take. So for example, if there's going to be a subdivision developed and it is potentially going to result in a take of endangered wildlife, you would need to get this permit in addition to any required construction permits that the city or another entity requires. It doesn't replace our permits, it's in addition to.
Do you know what that cost would be for that type of permit?
I don't. I don't know what the cost of the permit is, but the larger cost is that next piece, which is that the permit application has to be accompanied by a habitat conservation plan. So the cost of not just developing the plan, but doing whatever activity you're going to propose to mitigate that impact that you're having on the endangered wildlife is really where the significant cost for this comes in. I'm sure there is a permit fee, but the greater unknown or risk factor for projects in development is that secondary requirement to have an accompanied plan and carry that out.
So where do you get, who, is our permitting department gonna be charged with this?
The permit comes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So, and I do want to be clear that this requirement is not yet triggered, but
Okay,
because that we've been identified as a county of interest, we anticipate that it's not a matter of if, but when. So we're trying to get out ahead of it a little bit and make some good plans, which we'll talk about here in just a second. So it's my understanding, and David might help me a little bit because I know you've worked with this in your prior life. I think probably what we would see is requiring proof that an incidental take permit has been issued, much like we require proof that asbestos requirements have been met before we issue our permit, but we wouldn't be the one administering the permit process for the wildlife piece. That's how I would anticipate that working. So a habitat conservation plan, what that is, it's a document that ensures that there's adequate minimization and mitigation of the effects of the authorized incidental take permit. So the plan has to describe the impacts that are likely to result from the activities that the applicant wants to undertake and the measures that the applicant will undertake to avoid, minimize, and mitigate those impacts. So in simple terms, that's what a habitat conservation plan is. So this is a slide that that I asked Judge Blackburn to share. This is something he shared with a group of city representatives that met on this topic a few weeks ago. So I just kind of wanted to show you his thoughts. Again, we believe that the Endangered Species Act application will continue to expand, and that it's not a question of if the listed or threatened endangered species are going to be found in Bell County, but simply a question of when. From his perspective, the question is how can we best prepare for and manage for a listed species in order to protect the species, but also to continue to allow for the growth and development of our community. And he has stated that we need to have a discussion about habitat conservation plans within the county. So that's my bringing this topic to you today. So the potential benefits of having a habitat conservation plan in place proactively are that it will help us balance both development and conservation, could provide funding for conservation, provides a tool for developers and landowners to more easily and cost effectively comply with their federal laws, provides more certainty for both public and private projects, that permit process. You have a approved habitat conservation plan already in place, so the permit process can go more quickly, and you can feel more certain that you will be approved. Allows us to help continue to control and manage our economic growth while also ensuring preservation of open spaces and the natural character of the community, and facilitates the recovery of listed species. So those are some of the benefits of considering a habitat conservation plan. From the standpoint of who could benefit from developing this sort of plan, we feel like we as governmental entities will potentially could benefit as we undertake capital projects that might require a hazard conservation plan or mitigating efforts in order to be allowed to construct projects. Same with school districts and other public political subdivisions. We think that TxDOT would be able to utilize a habitat conservation plan, private developers, landowners, and citizens. Texas Park and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and interested conservation groups could all benefit from something like this. So essentially the question is, do we as a county want to develop a habitat conservation plan? And if so, the recommendation is to engage someone to help us with that process. There's a lot of things that go into creating a approved habitat conservation plan. So we would need to identify what geographic area the plan would cover and what species, what kind of activities. It would cover goals and objectives for both biological as well as conservation action, as develop our preservation design, our conservation strategy, be able to have sufficient monitoring and management of the program, how we would fund the program, and just overall help us make sure that before we apply for a permit application, that our application is complete and is likely to be approved. So it's fairly common for these other counties that are involved in having some type of endangered species process to develop a countywide habitat conservation plan. A few examples from around our area: Comal County, Hayes, and Williamson County, as well as the Southern Edwards Plateau, all have habitat conservation plans. Most of those are managed directly by the county, and Williamson County has a foundation that administers their program. So geographically, you can see what that looks like, and Bell County just to the north of that, of counties that manage this process in a kind of this systematic way of having a countywide hazard or habitat conservation plan. So Judge Blackburn has asked cities and other interested, other potential stakeholders if they're interested in pursuing the conversation further about establishing a habitat conservation plan. this is not a requirement, we don't have to do it, but if we have an overall plan in place, when someone goes to get an individual incidental take permit, they can fall under our habitat conservation plan instead of each individual project having to develop a plan for anything that might result in an incidental take. So this is not committing us to move forward with the habitat conservation plan, but I do need some discussion from you all today on whether we want to continue to explore this process with the county. Judge Blackburn is looking for our feedback, and so I'm looking for yours.
Is the county willing to sort of take on the administration of it like those other counties have?
I think so. There's a
Makes sense to
lot
do
more
that.
questions
Sure.
than there are answers, but I do think that they are willing to consider that.
So it's not if, it's when.
That is my opinion, and that is Judge Blackburn's opinion. We could be wrong, but
I'm sorry.
but there's active investigation for the endangered species happening within Bell County by other jurisdictions. And so, when I think that we have similar geographic formations here, as do those other counties. I think probably the main reason that they are currently covered and we're not is simply a political jurisdiction line that was drawn in that original study, and that no longer there's not an opportunity to say, oh, we don't want to be studied as a county.
Well, I'd like to take the burden off the developers. That would leave them more questions than they need to deal with. Plan. So I would be for it.
It's gonna happen anyway.
Absolutely.
No reason not to go forward and investigate it.
So if the county takes on the administration of the program, which I think everybody would agree that would be our preferred method for sure, what responsibility would the city have?
That's all to be determined.
Okay, so that's part of the,
Yeah,
and I guess there'd be some sort of permitting responsibility, possibly if the subdivision is built over one of these defined areas.
so my understanding, if there's a endangered species designated in Bell County, and you have a project that could result in an incidental take of that, then my understanding is your first step is kind of an environmental assessment. And if that environmental assessment finds that you are likely to disturb the species and harm them, and the karst invertebrates are harmed by construction activity. So if they're there, it's going to find that you're going to harm them by the construction activities. That's when you would need to get the permit, and then would need to show how you're going to mitigate that. What I've seen from the other county plans that I reviewed is a lot of it is either purchasing a property or easements for conservation, and that there's like I don't know if the correct terminology is like a credit system, but if your project's going to disturb 12 acres, then you would have to buy 50 credits, and so the conservation plan has purchased enough land to have this many credits go towards that for that many incidental take permits, and that developer or the political jurisdiction or whoever is doing the project would contribute a proportionate share. And when that capacity is taken, you would have to acquire other land or come up with other mitigation strategies. So to answer your question, I would see that we would participate certainly if we have a project, there's going to be a financial implication for us. And then again, from a permitting standpoint, I would think that we would approach it where we would, much like we do other state and federal requirements like asbestos, where the state agency is issuing the permit or the documentation, but we are required to see that and show that, and confirm that that's been done before we issue a permit.
Well, Brent, karst geologic formations are greatly affected by underground drainage water flow changes.
Yes.
So developer A is developing here, no species being affected, but the drainage that developer A affects area B where a species may live. How does that all get balanced out in some way?
My
Or dealt with?
understanding is that it would be through the environmental assessment.
Impact statement?
That they would, that, you would have a qualified professional, look at your potential impact, and if they found a direct, or I presume potentially an indirect, impact, that would be shown, and a mitigation plan would be required.
So
David's over there probably just going, that's not at all how it works.
That's generally, I mean,
well, is developer who's gonna develop X area required then to hire an environmental impact statement made, done? He has to hire he or she has to hire an environmental, qualified person to do an underground geologic drainage assessment.
so there's multiple layers to it. So as you go through the development of the plan that we're talking about, the first layer would be that there would be regions identified. And then a developer would then look, are you in that region? Or are you out of that region? So we would not likely see the entire county blanketed as a karst region. You would see sections where the geology exists to potentially have a karst feature.
Okay.
So if you're in that region, then your next likely step is you have to make a determination. Do you have karst features or do you not have karst features on your property? If you do, then you would go to your next step. If you don't, then you're done at that point. If you do have the karst features, then you would need to make a determination of if there are endangered species in those features, and if there's endangered species, then you go to the mitigation plan. So it's not necessarily all in on every single piece of property in the county. It's, you kind of start at the top and think of it like a sieve. As you kind of rattle soil and rocks through it, each layer takes some out, and what you're left with down at the bottom is the things that we really need to address.
My house is all karst. Long built, but just as an
Uh-huh.
example, a lot of Canyon Creek is all karst.
So I guess you're getting the head nod.
Yes, sir, thank you.
All right, item 4 is to receive a presentation regarding the proposed amendments to chapter 40, which is nuisances of the city code of ordinances to add graffiti removal requirements per section 250.006 of the Texas Local Government Code. Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think you can tell by the title of this workshop agenda item that I've had a lot of help from legal, and because mine would have just said graffiti stuff. But thank you, Amanda, for helping. If this gets too in depth, I appreciate Amanda being here. She will be the one to answer that. But the long and short of it is, we're trying to bring our chapter 40 nuisances code up to match the state of Texas, their demands. So wanted to start off with what is graffiti and why it's a problem. Public nuisance, I guess. I think the focal point here, I'll let y'all read that, but is the unauthorized portion of it. So for the most part, you can pretty much do what you want to on your own property, but if somebody else comes on that property and tags it up, then that is graffiti. And it's a public nuisance because it does tend to reduce the value of property. Private property, theoretically, it invites more vandalism and graffiti. Looking at it, there's urban blight, it can be called. And it's detrimental to the safety and welfare of the public all in conjunction, it kind of can bring a neighborhood down. So previously, we've addressed graffiti through the IPMC, or the International Property Maintenance Code, which all had adopted the 2000, or it was adopted by council, the 2009 edition. And we use 3029 regarding the defacement of property, and that no person shall willfully or wantonly damage, mutilate, deface any exterior surface of a structure. So that's how we have been addressing graffiti. But oddly enough, in 2009, and I know we're way behind on this, but the state of Texas said that yes, municipalities can require an owner of a property to remove graffiti, but we have to offer to clean it up for them for free. And we cannot go on to clean it up and charge them whatever it might be until they refuse the offer. So that's a little weird. We always thought it was weird. I didn't quite believe it until I read it, and then Amanda assured me it was real, no matter how weird it is. So we have to offer to clean it up.
So if the property owner says yes, it's done for free. If the property owner says no, municipality goes and cleans it and charges.
There's a series of steps. I can clean it themselves, of course.
Backwards.
It's insane. Well, I shouldn't say that. Elected officials have decided to do this, so I don't know if it's insane or not. My assumption, not that you asked.
Actually, that tracks. So that makes sense.
My assumption is that a group of people complained because cities were coming down on them and making them clean up graffiti, and it was costing them a lot of money, and something happened. I don't
The
have
police
any.
would take care of it. They get those vagrants.
I did not say that. I would never even almost carry a gun. I'm not gonna-
Usually go after the property owner for graffiti abatement, and they're usually not going to cause the
That's right.
graffiti to
Yeah.
the property,
That's
so.
when I was asleep.
Then you have to, give them the opportunity to have it cleaned up before you penalize them. For having it. If that was the intent behind it.
But it meant that it went a different way.
Wow.
And I'm so, yes, Mary.
Who determines that it's graffiti?
Well, I suppose code would, and then reach out to the property owner, and their option would be, yes, that is graffiti, and we would like for you to clean it up or not, or they could say, no, I did that. And then I'd say, all right.
And,
Art.
It's their property.
wait, that's my confusion. The owner says, yes, I did that and I love it, so everybody has to.
It's not a violation at that point.
Okay, that was my confusion. Thank you.
Acceptable or not, it's not a violation.
No,
So,
right. It stays put if the owner wants it, as long as it's not, declared vulgar, or, no?
That's a whole other
Okay,
issue that we
never mind,
could talk
sorry.
about, but
Generally speaking, yes, Susan. If the property owner likes it there, barring some exceptions, it's just considered a freedom of expression.
And art, the owner's private art,
that's right.
I got it.
That
There's
is right.
actually an exception written in the proposed draft that accepts artwork.
Say what?
There's an exception in the draft that Richard and I worked on together that accepts artwork, which is authorized either or put together by the property owner or the property owner can authorize someone to put that piece of art on their property. So
Okay.
there's a direct
Okay.
exception in the code for art.
But if it was just general graffiti, like what you would
Yeah.
consider graffiti, someone's just tagged the building, but if the property owner said, no, that's art, then we have to take it as that.
That was mine.
Yes, ma'am. There's a lot of, I don't know, definitions here, like what's art kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And by the way, all the pictures in here could go either way, or most of them. Like this is, I don't know if it's Banksy, but it's similar to
I was
him.
just gonna say, Nancy.
It's similar to the work he has done.
Yes.
I would call that art, but if it was my building, I might not want it on there, and therefore, if somebody put it on there without my approval, it would be considered graffiti. So, nonetheless, sorry, moving on. So the last thing we spoke about was municipality has to offer to remove for free, Oh, Jim disappeared on me. It was weird. And then the property owner has refused the offer. So this is how we're going to address it. And Amanda approved this, so I'm feeling okay about it. We're going to send a letter for an offer of removal, which will include, our offer, a consent form to enter their property, and then a liability waiver, which is standard language we use anytime we go on somebody's property. If there's an issue, something gets broken, they won't hold us responsible. We will wait 2 weeks for a response, which is our standard 2-week. We send out a high grass letter or whatever, wait a couple of weeks. If the offer letter is returned as refused or unclaimed, we're assuming refusal for these three. If there's no response received, or if the owner responds but doesn't sign the consent form, we're going to consider that refusal. If the offer is refused, then we send a notice of violation or a notice to remove letter. And then those have to be delivered either by handing to them personally or by certified mail. If the notice cannot be delivered by mail or handed to them personally, then we can publish it in the paper, post it on a building, tape it up there. You might have seen red tags or whatever if you're out and about. That's how we do substandard structures. Or we're also allowed to post on a placard, stake to the ground. So you stick a stake with a piece of paper on it saying, here's your offer. We do that occasionally. And then we give them by stake 15 days to remove the graffiti.
But Buford, I'm still confused. Go back to wherever you were. Okay, here.
Yes, ma'am.
To initiate part one, someone has to have complained about it, right?
No, ma'am.
No. We're just, the city sees it and says, we're going to send this letter?
It could come in through the form of complaint. It could come in from a property owner saying somebody has put graffiti on my building.
All right.
It could be my guys driving around and seeing graffiti on a building, just like any other kind of violation that we address.
And so your guys are driving around, they see graffiti, send this letter, and the owner says, I love it, I put it there, and we back off.
Yes, ma'am.
Got it.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Let me just add to that. And I don't know why, if we're offering to clean it up, I don't think anybody's going to lie to us about wanting it or not wanting it.
Right.
So I think they'll be legit about it. They're not going to get in trouble if they say, I didn't want it there and you need to come clean it up. You see my point?
Right, perfectly.
So graffiti removal. If the city's offer is accepted, meaning they will allow us to go onto their property, we'll either pressure wash it or paint over the graffiti. If it's refused and the property owner does not remove the graffiti within 15 days of the receipt, so we go through that whole process, they either didn't respond or refused, or they didn't remove it themselves, then we will pressure wash, paint over the graffiti. We will track our time and material for the cost of the abatement. We will send the property owner a bill for abatement. And then if it is not paid, we will file a lien similar to other cleanups or grass mows, things like that. Or we will file a complaint against the property owner with the municipal court, whichever way we kind of deem is the most, I don't know, the best way to go. And we do both often. So our timeline is obviously today's August 19th, workshop. We'd like to bring it for first reading on your next council at September 2nd. And then assuming it's approved, we will bring it back on the 16th for a second reading. And are there any questions?
Have you had an influx of these issues, or is it just kind of hit and miss?
The problem is we had an issue that we didn't have a legal way of addressing. So we have not had recently an influx of issues. We get 2 or 3 graffiti complaints a year, but it's out there and we have not acted on it because we did not have a way to act on it legally. So we want to be able to address it. I do believe that it adds to blight in the neighborhood. So even if it winds up that we do it ourselves, the problem will be addressed.
Isn't the city sponsoring painting that big curb there right across from the mall?
And we're doing it. I mean, we're doing the base paint.
I got you. Out there.
It's art, it's not graffiti.
I think it was, wasn't it covering graffiti, wasn't it?
There was some graffiti on there.
Graffiti,
There was some, it wasn't that.
yeah.
The backside of the HEB mall.
Yes, ma'am, on Market
I
Loop.
think that's
Sure.
a good idea.
Well, that was Brenn's. It was a great idea. And then she got Nancy into it and then somehow we got involved. Actually,
That's
do the
not
work.
We know why you're
City
involved.
sponsored graffiti.
I
Because
just
we know
mentioned it to Nancy and the next thing I know, it's like all the way done, so that's.
Well, we're not
that's
quite done.
Nancy.
To be honest, we ran out of paint. We can't get the paint. They're just out. So we're fighting with Sherwin-Williams and everybody else.
I have a garage full, I'll give you.
Well, it's in specific colors.
This is
Nancy's
not
very,
graffiti.
Nancy's very picky. So if you can get it.
Pastels only.
That's right.
Buford, we know why you're involved because of your brother David.
He does graffiti. No.
He's a wonderful artist.
He is a good
He would be great. He would be great.
You may.
Yes, Tom.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Question, is that graffiti? Or is that art?
And that is graffiti if somebody put it on there without the building owners.
West Texas.
My brother always said, who is the artist? He says, it's all art. It's just there's good art and bad art.
Yeah,
So,
but that's.
There's authorized art and.
That's right. In this
Yeah.
case, it's authorized. and unauthorized. Very good, yes.
Yes.
That's actually pretty creative. I actually like that one.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful.
And the face is pretty cool too, probably two different artists, but.
I think this is probably a dumb question, but.
I'm not agreeing that it's a good question. I'm saying, yes, sir.
Thanks, I just caught that. Thank you. Your time is over. So, so the dumb question, the dumb part of this question is, on the food truck changes, we left out a whole constituency that ended up blowing up.
Sure.
Are we living out a constituency of, can anybody think of any? I know, that's the dumb question part. I can't think of anybody that we're
The only
possibly.
thing about this is
Yes,
just adopting
Banksy.
what's in state law for the process for removing
Right.
graffiti. I mean, this is already in state law, this is just how it's supposed to.
Well, that's
address-
sort of what we did with the food trucks too, and it became this whole thing.
Well,
And I can't-
I would say we went a little
We
further.
went
with the
further
food
than
truck.
state law.
Okay,
And it
That's-
involves
that's-
people's business interests.
right. Well, no, and that, again, that goes back to the dumb
It's-
question
no,
part. I can't
it's
think of
not a-
anybody.
It's not a dumb question, it's a very good one, and we have talked about that on future code amendments, is okay, who is this constituency? So it's not a dumb question, if there's somebody that, we need to be engaging with, staff hasn't thought of that, but if you all know somebody, we'll definitely do
I
that.
agree with Brent. It's not a dumb question.
Well, it's just who knows, right? You don't know who will come out of the
Well,
woodwork.
so we've got two levels here. First of all, all we're trying to do, or asking you to do, is to bring code into alignment with the state law. And then we have enforcement, which is a totally different level of this. So, I will always follow Bren and council's, guidance on this. But, what I would say is, while this does not guarantee that we will go after graffiti, what it does is allows us
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go after graffiti.
Understood.
But there is graffiti out there that we as a community and business or property owners do not want on their buildings. And historically, we would have said, hey, you're in violation, clean it up. And this, now we would have to offer to clean it up for them.
Mhm.
And I personally feel like regardless of my personal opinion, it's the law. So we're prepared to do that.
I sympathize with
Well, we're also
with the property owner though. One time at my office, my fence was tagged.
Yep.
And it's irritating, right? And I shouldn't have cleaned that up.
I agree.
Don't kid or, whatever.
Yeah, the historic post office was tagged on the backside. And there's been several. So,
Yeah.
okay, I didn't-
Sorry, Susan.
No, I was just gonna say, you were concerned about some constituency coming out of the woodwork, so to speak. This is not stepping on any constituency. This is offering a service to homeowner or to owners of property who don't want something that someone has put on their property.
I mean, they may be constituents, but they're vandals as well. So, so we don't, I think we're concerned with the property owners, and this is
Right,
on the
that's what
side
I'm
of, yes, ma'am,
saying.
yes.
Chief.
There is also a crime prevention aspect to this entirely. So if you have gang members or hybrid gangs or heavy gang members, they will tag areas, geography, then creates more angst, elevates the angst between those two groups. So the more that we can do to eliminate this from our communities, there's a true crime prevention aspect to it as well.
Thanks.
Makes sense.
I think it's personally, I think it's a plus. It just
Oh, I do too.
adds another tool to our toolbox, and we're in alignment with state law. We don't get in trouble. It allows us to move forward. We don't have a lot, but we do have some, and what we do see should be going after. And there is a process to put murals and things on walls, and
Yes.
I've seen them. We've
And
all
that's a
seen them. They're
different
lovely.
story.
They can be lovely.
Yeah, that's a totally different story.
Yes, ma'am.
So Chief, are you seeing that happen? Are you seeing much gang activity that's related to graffiti, or I guess maybe even vice versa? Or like as Buford says, we don't have much of it yet, and this is maybe a time to.
There's some of it that I noticed that's out there. Buford and I actually had a conversation in reference to this and how do we, as a city, process these things. And I had to get familiar with the state statutes, completely opposite in Kansas, where I came from. The owner had 5 days to remove it, and if not, they removed it and then got billed for it. So part of it was getting my mind wrapped around the state statute here and working with Buford to figure out the process. But we do see some of this. Yes.
Okay. All right. Council, any other questions? All right, just move forward.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Yes, sir.
The last item is item number 7, to receive departmental updates. No, sorry. Yeah, I did. Discuss virtual participation options for the city boards and commissions.
Thank you. Hopefully this will be quick. So, the governor has lifted the, flexibility, for the Open Meetings Act effective at the end of this month for virtual participation. So going back to just the standard state law, that has applied, before the pandemic. We wanted to check in with you guys to make sure that you're still, the last we talked, we had talked about that ideally in the future, our boards and commission members would participate in meetings in person, but that we would continue to offer virtual options for residents and other interested parties to participate, but that we would ask the actual board and commission members to attend the meetings in person once the either in state or we lifted our disaster declaration. So with the Delta variant still very much present, it's my opinion that I think some of our board and commission members may still want to continue to participate virtually. So I just wanted to make sure that my direction was in alignment with your wishes, which would be to continue to allow virtual participation as long as we comply with the Open Meetings Act. So boards that are quasi judicial in nature, like the Planning and Zoning Commission, to be able to participate virtually, those members would have to be on camera with audio during the meeting. Whereas right now, calling in is sufficient, but at the end of this month, that those flexibilities go away. So I just wanted to make sure you all were still comfortable until we repeal our disaster declaration that board and commission members can participate as long as we're virtually, as long as we are complying with the Open Meetings Act. And you don't want to, at this point, ask everybody to transition to in-person quite yet.
I think that makes sense.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Now last, receive departmental updates from Information Technology and Public Works. Alan, you're up.
Okay, I'm gonna make it quick. I have to get downstairs and get ready. Isn't it? This is my quarterly progress. As you know, with every department, it's very busy, and we're no exception. Currently, we're working on multiple projects. I just brought up a few, but these are some of our major ones. Transition our financial system to the cloud. What we're doing is we're actually migrating our current financial system production and test environments to the cloud. And that's going to entail actually moving those applications It's gonna be more like a software as a service where they're hosting it in Atlanta, and then it's actually being copied through multiple data centers throughout the country. And so it's gonna be we're gonna be more dependent on our web availability that we have into the city. Because that's how everybody accesses it. GIS permits development map. We called this, what's the name of this map again?
And by we, he means me.
Oh,
This is the Bebop map.
Bebop map. We actually had a request to look at developing a map that included any GIS permits and developments that we currently have out there. And we created that, and now it's available for public consumption online. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it, but it's out there. And kind of we had a lot of questions in the past about what's going out there, what's going on with this location. And so you can actually go out there and look.
Well, wait a minute, Alan, where is it?
It's on our website. city
Okay, so
website,
in
under
the,
GIS maps.
okay,
Yes.
under GIS maps,
Yes.
obviously, thanks.
So at every family get together, my father-in-law, who my kids call Bebop, asks me something like, oh, there's work going out over here. What's going on? And so this is making me look very smart because I can just pull up the map and go, oh yes, that's a, whatever it is. And so Alan and his team developed, it's actually a very incredible tool. It's helpful to visually see the growth in the community. So it includes all single family and duplex development over the past 3 years, and then all new commercial development. So you'll see a little dot on the map. You can click on it and it'll bring up the details of the permit. And so it's really a really good tool, and that's available, as Alan said, on our website, our main page under maps. So check it out. Mhm.
Thank you.
You can actually turn it off and on by ear also. That's one look at. This is a project that the chief has worked hard on, very much so. And we've been working on it hard also in IT. We're working with Bell County, City of Killeen, City of Belton, City of Parker Heights, and multiple other agencies, and moving forward with a new records management software for law enforcement. Currently, most Neil Paramore from Chief, he's done a lot of the heavy lifting. So, but currently, a lot of the bigger entities like Bell County, Killeen, and City of Temple all have to integrate. It's kind of an older product. It's antiquated, and I know a lot of our law enforcement officers across the county do not like it. So we're trying to find something more efficient. And this is gonna actually, I think, half of the English-speaking world uses this software by population. I mean, a lot of federal agencies, a lot of big cities here in the United States, the whole government of Canada, Australia, England.
But this will allow each entity to connect with the others.
Yes, this is a really well integrated
Very nice.
system. So this is going to be very nice, and we're going through and designing the server aspects of it now, and the failover capabilities, and all that in IT. And I've been writing this whole week about a 50-page document for the agreement. So, but it's going to be a lot of work for the next probably 14 to 16 months. Yes, sir.
So if I were a betting person, I would not have bet that we would have been able to get all of the different law enforcement agencies to the table and agree. And Chief Reynolds has been an advocate for this project and led that process, and has just done an amazing job. So everyone's come to the table. Everyone's excited about the project, and honestly, I am surprised, but pleasantly surprised that we're moving forward in this way. And it's really going to increase the effectiveness of our regional, of our county, and I don't know if we've solved any covered code issues, if they can join in or not, but it's certainly a regional benefit for law enforcement and sharing data, and I think will be a really great outcome. So Chief has done an exceptional job, and Alan's team and City Attorney's Office have also been involved in getting us to this point as well. So great job, everybody.
We're gonna be, the city of Temple is actually gonna be hosting it for the rest of the agencies across Canada. This is not the computer aided dispatch system, which is 911. That's a separate system. We currently replace every 4 years, 4.5 years, we replace our mobile data laptops, which are ruggedized laptops that are police and fire vehicles. And so far this year, we replaced about 110 of those. We can't replace them all at once because we can't take all the cars out of service. They get new cars, so it's a process, and it happens. Police when they come in. Also, we're on track to replace about 150 PCs and laptops this year. This is on top of that 138. So this year, I think we've completely replaced about 300. We're going to be replaced about 300 devices. Also, we met our Texas State Cybersecurity Certification. This is that test that everybody has to take by law now across the city. There are some exceptions to this process, but overall, most employees have to take this. And I want to thank all the departments for their participation. Also, we're working on a Parks and Recreation software upgrade for the city. We're working with Kevin and his group to actually modernize the website, and also more web-based software for the league scheduling and task management. These are our KPIs for the quarter. As you can tell, people do a pretty good job at keeping our availability across all of our systems. We're very fortunate that our network availability has been about 100%. We had some issues with telecom, and that represents overall about 8 hours of downtime a year. So, but overall on the network availability, we haven't had, knock on wood, we haven't had any downtime. Same thing with Office 365 availability, which is our everybody uses. And then also our next gen 911 accuracy. Last year, the state and federal government require us to maintain a certain accuracy of all the addresses for 911. And that accuracy rate we have to meet is 99.5%, and we're consistently beating that. We're close to almost 99.99%, 98%. Some of the upcoming, we're going to continue records management, mobile data laptop, and the PC. The transition, we've actually are in a testing environment now, getting that prime to go. Continued development of agenda template for all boards and commissions. We've done it for mayor and council, but we haven't done it for the other boards and commissions. We're also going to be developing a GIS open data portal, and this will allow us to offer whatever we have in GIS people can download. Again, we're working on this this is a separate system, Parks and Recreation work order software and airport. We're working on, Public Works uses a product called CityWorks for the work order system and asset management. Parks is going to be moving on to it, and so is airports. We're working on those projects. We purchased cemetery software 2 years ago, but our GIS application in cemetery has been so successful that Parks wants to use our the software we built over that time. So we're gonna be, that our GIS group built, so we're gonna be, stop using this current cemetery software and move to our home built solution, which is ArcGIS. We have a lot of projects going on. I know Belinda Mackey has her hands full with all these projects, but currently through renovations and expansions and new facilities, we're always working on getting network and telecom availability to those facilities. One of my biggest issues this year, biggest priority, my highest priority has been this cybersecurity. We have multiple cybersecurity tools, but this is more of an automated tool to help us see that threat, and we can actually visibly start looking at real time. Right now, we can actually see threats, but it's hard to decipher what are threats, what are false positives, what are. So we're always working, and this helps us to actually be monitored 24 hours a day. Because this is our number one threat to our business right now is to our computing environment is cybersecurity. You read about it all the time. Surveillance camera projects, working on surveillance cameras, Hillcrest Cemetery and Temple Public Library. Two others. We actually we ordered the equipment for the Wildcat Statue Surveillance Project. So we should have that equipment in September. One thing on any computing hardware or device, we're seeing 90 to $120, 20-day delay on all shipments. So because of supply chain issues.
Is it surveillance of the statue for graffiti? I mean, damage to the cat?
Yeah, they already had some, I can't remember if it was graffiti or,
Right,
I think it was paint.
but that's what this is for.
Yeah, this was for to monitor that. We're actually putting.
Exactly, football season coming up, you're gonna get a couple.
Right.
Yeah,
Speaking of graffiti.
yes. Gives Buford the tool.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that's it. If you have any questions.
I think you told us one time how many threats, how many sort of cybersecurity threats the city.
Every day.
Yeah,
2,000 a day.
right, yeah, it's an astounding number.
So it's an ongoing job.
The Iron Dome.
We hope. I never want to say never because it can't happen during the tornado attack.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Don?
Yes, sir, thank you. We have Ralph Martinez here. He's our Assistant Director of Public Works over operations, which means he supervises the divisions of solid waste as well as the fleet division. So any questions I can't answer, Ralph can answer. If not, we'll just blame. We'll say Kenny wasn't going to answer them. So this is for the second quarter of the calendar year. I'm going to start off with some transportation work items from the last quarter. I had a couple of traffic management studies that we did, one resulting in speed limit signs, some tree clearing in preparation for a capital road project. Also had 4 areas of drainage infrastructure repair and a couple of areas of street repair, mostly thanks to Winter Storm Uri. And those are just some pictures of some sunflower drainage that we corrected, as well as Windland Road that's been completed. Always onboarding new staff. So these are 7 gentlemen who joined us in the solid waste and transportation divisions. The fleet division worked with solid waste to teach them how to take the tires off of the rubber, basically take the tires off the wheel hubs, basically. And so we produced legally disposable waste stream, as well as one that we can take to Temple Iron and Metal and, cash it in. So hopefully Tracy appreciates that.
I do.
Three new major assets placed in service, the most prominent being garbage truck for our new 8th route. Work items for the coming quarter, we have another couple of traffic management studies, as well as another couple of street reconstruction items. Again, mostly thanks to Winter Storm Uri. The one at Southern Draw has already been completed, so that's just a recent item we got done. That's the last time you'll have to watch that tire go across there. Oh. You had 5 or something for me? I don't know what happened there. I was lying. You'll have to watch that tire go across 3 more times. Where's the sensor at? Is it under the screen?
Yeah.
I'll go closer.
I'm tired.
So those are the work items for the transportation division. We just watched now. It's the last time we'll see that tire. So some end of the fiscal year work items for our solid waste and fleet services divisions. For solid waste, most of those are a matter of communicating with our customers to help us work better, as well as just to handle some, some things like the holiday brush and bulk pickup. And the fleet services work items at this time of the year, they're literally housekeeping items, as well as working with all of the city departments to help plan out their purchases that were budgeted. You're looking at the location of the future solid waste complex amidst Wilson Park and the service center and the landfill. This is really a Belinda Mackey project. She's managing that, so I want to say thank you, but we're really excited about this and looking forward to it. This is going to have an administrative building as well as a building where the heavy work gets done. That's going to be the replacement facility for our recycling warehouse that we rent. And that's it.
You had a calendar groundbreaking for the facility?
We have not scheduled a groundbreaking yet. That calendar was my little icon that shows me I'm moving from what we did the last quarter to what we're working on this
But
quarter.
ballpark, when do you anticipate it? I mean, really rough ballpark.
Rough ballpark, I think, end of October.
Oh,
Does that sound right, David?
groundbreaking.
In October, early November.
Wow.
Possibly.
You'll invite us to groundbreaking?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Would love to have you there.
Like to be there.
The
We'll
mo-
make you wear a hard hat.
I'll
Turn a
have to
shovel.
wear a hat. I own a shovel.
the most accurate answer for that would come from Belinda.
Okay.
So when I want to know about when it is, I call
ballpark.
her.
Very rough.
Got it. What I'm hearing is you would like us to construct a ballpark too.
No, that's not what you're hearing.
Like, any other questions?
While you're here,
Yes, sir.
I know I talked to Jessica a little bit about the construction traffic there in Western Hills.
Yes, sir.
And I think we, a group, have talked about it. It's kind of allowed by right, and that's just how it goes there. But then we also hear that some of the construction folks are going to talk to the drivers, et cetera. So I haven't heard anything lately. I don't know if you have had complaints from the neighborhood
Well, we
lately.
visited, yes, so it's kind of weekly, they sort of check in with me and pictures.
Yeah, but it just is what it is.
I think they are understanding that, it's just the frustration is still there. But Brandon Davis come up with an idea to put up a.
Driver
Web driver
feedback sign.
feedback sign.
Yes, so I think that will help.
The
A
signs,
driver feedback sign. So it's that sign you'll see like usually on a trailer mounted with
Slow
the
down.
posted speed limit and then a radar that will show you how fast you're going.
Mhm.
So we'll be mobilizing that to the neighborhood by Friday, I think, was the
So we don't know how much.
Yeah,
it's being-
we're gonna try to get out there Friday, and that'll also give us data to look at about how fast they actually are traveling.
So that does keep that data
Yeah,
Are you able to
it's,
identify the?
it's supposed to have an immediate impact on the driver's behavior, but it'll give us something to assess to.
And I don't know if the transportation study has looked at this or not, but it is gonna be a problem when that starts to build out. The backup at the light at the loop, because the only entrance is on Hopi, that direction. And they can't get off on the access road, they're gonna have to come all the way around, so that light is gonna back up even farther for them.
That's Ermine, right where that 7-Eleven is, that's what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
so that if they decide to stay on the loop, then they could come back around and go. But if you want to go straight from Hopi in, you're gonna have to wait at that light. And it's already backed up, so, you know, I don't know what we can do to help that out. At 5 o'clock, it's backed up all the way, you know, to the other side, so.
We'll make a special note to have our mobility master planning team take a look at that as well to see what recommendations they might have. Yeah, it's a very congested area already.
Yeah. Thanks. And it's just starting pretty, so, I mean, this is just the beginning for them. Thank you for caring about them.
Anything else for Mr. Bond? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that exhausts our list for today, so I will adjourn this meeting of the Temple City Council workshop. It is now about 13 minutes until 5. See you downstairs at 5 o'clock. Thank y'all.